Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. All right. So, text 12, I believe. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 22nd day of September 2025 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 9, the most confidential knowledge, text 12 at the bottom of page 392. Moghasha Mogha Karmano Mogha Jnana Vichetasaha Rakshasim Asurim Chaiva Prakatim Mohinim Shitaha Moghasha Mogha Karmano Moga Jnana Vichetasaha Rakshasim Asurim Chaiva Prakatim Mohinim Shritaha Moghasha Mogha Karmano Mogha Jnana Vichetasaha Rakshasim Asurim Chaiva Prakatim Mohinim Shritaha Moghasha Mogha Karmano Mogha Jnana Vichetasaha Rakshasim Asurim Chaiva Prakatim Mohinim Shritaha. Dhammaraj. Moghasha Mogha Karmano Mogha Jnana Vichetasaha Rakshasim Asurim Chaiva Prakatim Mohinim Shritaha. Tavas. Moghasha Mogha Karmano Mogha Jnana Vichetasaha Prakatim Mohinim Shritaha. Chad. Moghasha Mogha Karmano Mogha Jnana Vichetasaha Rakshasim Asurim Chaiva Prakatim Mohinim Shritaha. Bhakti Joe. Moghasha Mogha Karmano Mogha Jnana Vichetasaha Rakshasim Asurim Chaiva Prakatim Mohinim Shritaha. Ladies. Moghasha Mogha Karmano Mogha Jnana Vichetasaha Rakshasim Asurim Chaiva Prakatim Mohinim Shritaha. Ami. Moghasha Mogha Karmano Mogha Jnana Vichetasaha Rakshasim Asurim Chaiva Prakatim Mohinim Shritaha. Everyone online? Mogha Ashaha, baffled in their hopes. Mogha Karmanaha, baffled in fruitive activities. Mogha Jnanaha, baffled in knowledge. Vichetasaha, bewildered. Rakshasim, demonic. Asurim, atheistic. Cha and Eva, certainly. Prakatim, nature. Mohinim, bewildering. Shritaha, taking shelter of. Translation. Those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. Okay. Purport. There are many devotees who assume themselves to be in Krishna consciousness and devotional service, but at heart do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, as the absolute truth. For them, the fruit of devotional service, going back to Godhead, will never be tasted. Similarly, those who are engaged in fruitive pious activities and who are ultimately hoping to be liberated from this material entanglement will never be successful either, because they deride the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. In other words, persons who mock Krishna are to be understood to be demonic or atheistic, as described in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Such demonic miscreants never surrender to Krishna. Therefore, their mental speculations to arrive at the absolute truth bring them to the false conclusion that the ordinary living entity and Krishna are one and the same. With such a false conviction, they think that the body of any human being is now simply covered by material nature, and that as soon as one is liberated from this material body, there is no difference between God and himself.
This attempt to become one with Krishna will be baffled because of delusion. Such atheistic and demoniac cultivation of spiritual knowledge is always futile. That is the indication of this verse. For such persons, cultivation of the knowledge in the Vedic literature, like the Vedanta Sutra and the Upanishads, is always baffled. It is a great offense, therefore, to consider Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to be an ordinary person, an ordinary man. Those who do so are certainly deluded because they cannot understand the eternal form of Krishna. The Brihad Vishnu Smriti clearly states, Yo veti bhautikam deham Krishnasya paramatmanaha sasarvasmad bahis karyah shrauta smarta vidhanataha mukam tasyavalokyapi sachelam snanam achadet. Means you jump into the Ganges with your clothes on. One who considers the body of Krishna to be material should be driven out from all rituals and activities of the Shruti and Smriti. And if one by chance sees his face, one should at once take bath in the Ganges to rid himself of infection. Close quote. People jeer at Krishna because they are envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Their destiny is certainly to take birth after birth in the species of atheistic and demoniac life. Perpetually, their real knowledge will remain under delusion, and gradually they will regress to the darkest region of creation. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshur unmidatam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So, some time ago, I came to the conclusion that an important part of the knowledge that we're trying to absorb here is making the right distinctions between what is spirit, what is matter, who is God, who is an ordinary living entity, and things like that. And here, Krishna is, as usual, we should look at these verses in context. And if you recall, in the previous verse, these are all famous verses. Avijananti mamudha manushim tanamashritam param bhav majananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the Supreme Lord of all that be. So this is one of the favorite things of the demons to do, is to mistake Krishna for an ordinary person. You notice if you read Krishna book, that when Krishna is in Vrindavan and there's all these demons attacking him, they never seem to get the idea. I mean, it's like they don't speak to each other, you know? You got the Keshi demon, and you got the Aristasura, the bull demon, and Bakasura, the duck demon. Actually, it's not a duck. I think when Prabhupada said buck, that the devotees who would translate would say duck. Buck is short for baka, which means a heron type, you know, not a duck. Ducks have bills, and herons have beaks. And if you remember, Krishna grabbed the beak and he split it apart. So anyway, so there's all of these demons, and they don't seem to get online enough and find out who this real Krishna is. And they just keep attacking. Even Dhenukasura, you know, and these demons, some of them come in groups, you know. So Dhenukasura is the donkey demon, you know. And he was occupying with his associates, probably his friends and associates, the tala forest with all these wonderful ripe tala fruits. And you remember the boys were out with Krishna and said, Krishna, we're so hungry. You know, don't you smell the beautiful fragrance of those tala fruits? They're ripe tala in the tree, but nobody can go there because there's these bunch of donkey demons that are, you know, oh, let's go. You know, so, okay. So he and Balaram went. And remember what happens. That chapter, I noticed, is very interesting because it features Balaram. You know, Krishna, when they start, they're just playing in the forest, they go out together, and Krishna starts praising Balaram. Oh, just see, these trees are all honoring you. They're, you know, they're bowing down, and everyone's coming. And then Balaram is the first one to go, and he kills Dhenukasura, whipping around, you know, centrifugal force. Very difficult to survive that. Throws him up into the tree, and other trees fall down. It's a whole thing. And then Dhenukasura's friends and associates are very upset, you know. So instead of understanding, well, you know, that was pretty easy, I think we should run away. No, they run sort of, you know. And of course, Krishna also gets involved, and they have a lot of fun, and they kill the demons in the same way. So this is Krishna is in these two verses. He's criticizing the demons for mistaking him. Avajananti ma mudha. So the word mudha, you learn that pretty quick, and it's kind of, that's fool and rascal, right? Foolish men, fools. They deride me when I appear in the human form, because they take me for an ordinary human being. They do not understand my param bhavam, my supreme nature, and mama bhuta maheshwaram, and my supreme rule over all other beings. And that's such fools, he says, those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, the fruit of activities, culture of knowledge are all defeated. In other words, they're baffled. This probably uses this word a lot in this word by word. They're baffled, meaning that due to that critical mistake of not being able to recognize who God is, and thinking it's an ordinary human being, then they maintain their offensiveness and their atheistic attitude, and they're defeated, because it means that the thing about the demons, they're completely grounded and paying attention to the material. That's the whole idea. So, and we find it in modern day. The science means to find all the material causes of everything, to figure everything out. And to try to say, well, there's a supreme intelligence over everything, and life, life only comes from life, and the supreme life. The scientists are, many of them, they're total atheists, and they don't want to believe it. And it's interesting, I remember over the years, there were certain very prominent atheists who would debate, and they would defeat Catholics or, others who were, trying to argue with them. And they became famous, and they wrote books and things, even made a lot of money on it, go on TV and everything. And every one of 3 or 4 of the most prominent ones, I forget their names, and even if I do them, I wouldn't share them with you, pollute the atmosphere. But they all had these scandalous things, They were unfaithful to their wives, or they committed some fraud, In other words, they didn't have that moral grounding that ultimately comes with the belief in God, that there's sin and that there's punishment and everything, And it's fascinating that's what the worst part of it is, and you see it in Krishna Lila all the time, that the big demons, they cause tremendous disturbance in society, and that's why Krishna comes, right? Yadaya Viklani Bhavati Bharata. When the discrepancies of dharma come, it's in society as a whole, and even Mother Earth becomes so disturbed, right, by the burden of the demons, that she goes to Lord Brahma and prays for him to do something. Then he can go to the ocean of milk and he meditates and says, "Don't worry, I'm coming soon." So this is an interesting theme that is the demonic, by atheistic views. They don't believe in God. They don't recognize my divinity. They think I'm an ordinary human being, and then they feel that, well, this is our field for domination. And that's what the demonic views are. And you read in 16th chapter the qualities. I love it when Krishna pretends to be a demon and he starts chanting the demon mantra. I know part of it. Ishvaroham, aham bogi, siddhoham, balavan sukhi. I am the supreme controller. I am perfect, powerful, and happy. Who can rival my power? Like that. So, but of course, it's so silly because death comes. No one can deny that. Even as Prabhupada says, when Krishna says Mrityu sarvaharas chaham, he says the demons, they don't believe in God. They don't believe there is a God, but they see God also. They see him as death. He comes in and takes away everything, threatens them, and they're terrified. There comes the Yamadutas and the dogs and the teeth and the whole thing. And so we don't want to go that route. We want to maintain our belief in God and humble service and recognize he's the controller. He's the supreme controller of everything, including us. That's the devotee's mood. So, but their hopes for liberation, fruit of activities, everything is defeated. That's the first verse we read. No, that was the second one we read. Okay, any questions on, I guess it's all text 12 is what we read.
That first sentence,
In the purport? There are many devotees who assume themselves to be in Krishna consciousness and devotional service, but at heart do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead in truth. Well, by this time, in writing the Bhagavad Gita, he had already seen some of his early devotees, distance themselves from the movement. And for one reason or another, they weren't strict in their sadhana, or they committed offenses, or somehow they lost faith. And, his first editor, Ray Rama, Hayagriva was once complaining, he was the main editor, but Ray Rama was first. And he edited the abridged Bhagavad Gita. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It was a little blue book. It was the first one that came out. And Hayagriva was complaining about some of his editing, but Prabhupada criticized him, said, no, he has one very good quality. He's completely surrendered, But he had, see, one of the things that I noticed over the years is that in those first years when I joined, one of the things that kept the devotee so enlivened in devotional service, and in fact to the point where I thought no one ever left. The first couple of months we just added bhaktas and more bhaktas, it was getting crowded, and then so-and-so left. I said, left? Why would anyone leave, Because we had 3 hours of Harinam every day, you can imagine, on the streets of New York, Manhattan. And Saturday night was a Maha Harinam, all devotees went out at Times Square, and after a couple of hours chanting, Jideshwar would come with a couple of big containers of halva, hot halva that he cooked. Oh, we had some. And that I realized over the years was a very important way of keeping strong in devotional service. Just have, a lot of Harinam and Kirtan. But here was Ray Rama, working on the books all the time. I don't know if he was going on at Harinam at all, and so he became, he couldn't stay strict, and he left. So, this is a warning. If you become bewildered and attracted by demonic and atheistic views, and that deluded condition hopes for liberation, it's all defeated. So anyway, this is by drawing distinctions. Now he's talking about the demons and those who are fools, Now he's going to talk about the Mahatmas. What's the definition of Mahatma? Another very famous verse. We're on page 394 of that book. 394. And do you want to stand? One of these little stands? You'll share it together. It's okay? All right. So page 394, and I'll just wait a minute till you're all set. Oh, they're going to give him a stand anyway. Okay. Now you're all set. So we're going to chant this verse. You each have a book. 2 books. 3 books? Okay. Mahatmanastamam parta daivim prakatimashtah pajantinanne manaso gyatva bhutadam abhyam. Now, the word "to" is here, but on the other hand, O son of Prita, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. So the idea is that someone who's reading the Bhagavad Gita may not be a committed devotee. You'd be attracted by this rather than to be mogasha, moga kama, moga jnana vichetasa. That you rather, this is the best way to go. So let's see what Prabhupada says about the Mahatma. This is a wonderful definition of Mahatma. In this verse, the description of the Mahatma is clearly given. The first sign of the Mahatma is that he is already situated in the divine nature. He is not under the control of material nature. And how is that effected? That is explained in the 7th chapter. One who surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, at once becomes freed from the control of material nature. Does anyone remember the verse, famous verse? Daivi yesha gunamahi mama maya duratya mame viye papadinte maya me tang tadamdite. The Daivi, this divine energy, he calls it divine. He calls it material energy divine because it's his. Daivi yesha gunamahi, composed of the 3 modes of nature. Mama maya duratya, very, very difficult to overcome. In fact, impossible on your own. But it's very powerful. That's why it's called Durga. Durga means you can't go. It's a prison. You might as well go to the fort, but you can be locked up in a fort or prison. So, but here he says, well, here's how you can get out. One who surrenders unto me, maya me tang tarantite, becomes delivered. Very important verse. So that's what Prabhupada is referring to here that's in the 7th chapter, 7:14. One who surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, at once becomes freed from the control of material nature. That is the qualification. One can become free from the control of material nature as soon as he surrenders his soul to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the preliminary formula. Being marginal potency, as soon as the living energy is freed from the control of the material nature, he is put under the guidance of the spiritual nature. The guidance of the spiritual nature is called Daivi Prakriti, divine nature. So when one is promoted in that way, by surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one attains to the stage of great soul, or Mahatma. The Mahatma does not divert his attention to anything outside of Krishna, because he knows perfectly well that Krishna is the original Supreme Person, the cause of all causes. There is no doubt about it. Such a Mahatma, or great soul, develops through association with other Mahatmas, pure devotees. Pure devotees are not even attracted by Krishna's other features, such as the four-armed Mahavishnu. They are simply attracted by the two-armed form of Krishna. They are not attracted to other features of Krishna, nor are they concerned with any form of a demigod or of a human being. They meditate only upon Krishna in Krishna consciousness. They are always engaged in the unswerving service of the Lord in Krishna consciousness. Now, Prabhupada mentioned about the marginal energy, and it's worth reviewing that. In our philosophy, as taught by Lord Chaitanya and Bhagavad Gita, of course, it's defined as Krishna has different kind of energies. And Sanatana Goswami asked the famous question when he surrenders to Lord Chaitanya, Kayami, who am I? Why am I suffering? Why is there suffering? If I don't understand these, and what use is on my erudition? Because he was very learned, actually, And so Lord Chaitanya asked this, and this is a verse that should be, we should make a necklace out of it. It's very important to remember this. Hare Krishna. So here's Lord Chaitanya's answer. Very instructive. Jivera swarupoi Krishnera nityadas. Krishnera tatasta shakti bheda bheda prakash. And the reason why I remember that verse because it refers to the marginal energy. So Jivera, of the Jiva, Swarup, the actual ultimate nature, you see, of the Jiva, is to be the servant of Krishna. That's our constitutional position, and that's why we're suffering, because we forgot that and we're leading a false life, we're identifying with this temporary material body and so many things. So that's the first line, but the second line is also very important. Jivera tatasta shakti bheda bheda prakash. So another understanding of the jiva is that he's marginal energy. Now what does that mean? Marginally, the example is perfect. We're right near the beach. If you walk down to the beach and you're actually near the water, you see it's coming in and going out. There's always, no matter if it's high tide or low tide, there's always a part of the beach that's covered and uncovered, covered and uncovered. So that part that's covered and uncovered can be thought to be marginal on the margin. So we are marginal means that we are innately spiritual. We are Krishna's eternal servants. We're, as he said in the 15th chapter, Mama Vangsha Jiva Loka Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, that every living entity is my anksha, is my part and parcel, eternally. Which means that just like you go down to the ocean, you get a vial of seawater, analyze it, it'll have the same chemicals as the big ocean. It'll be salty and everything else. So similarly, we have the same qualities as Krishna, but in minute degree. We're not God, but we're godly innately. And because we're minute, we have the tendency to also be affected and be entranced, if you will, by the material energy. There's another verse I quote all the time that illustrates this. Because as soon as we leave Krishna's protection and we turn our attention away from him, that's the origin of fear. Then we can feel the danger of the material energy and so forth. There's a bhayam. There's this famous verse in the 11th canon. Bhayam vitiya abhinaveshataksyad ishadapetasya viparhiyo smriti. He's analyzing what is the source of fear. How did we get this way? Ishara Petasya means turning away from the Isha, from the Supreme Lord. We turn our attention from him instead of being satisfied and being absorbed in Krishna consciousness and serving Krishna and responding to his desires and everything. We want to be independent. So that means by Dvitiya, the dualities of the material world, good and bad, hot and cold, pleasure and pain, we become absorbed in that. Which brings about bhayam. And one of the qualities there is ishara petasya, that's the original cause, turning away from Krishna. Viparyo asmati. Our position becomes reversed. Instead of being the servants of Krishna, we try to be the masters of Maya. So we're trying to be the controller, which is unnatural for us. And viparya asmati, and it all is based on forgetfulness. Maya covers our knowledge, and now we're in Maya. The next line begins, tanmayato. This is all by the influence of Krishna's Mayic energy, his bewildering energy. So one has to be buddha, intelligent, by hearing from the right source. And then what such intelligent person do? Tanmayato buddha abhajetam. Again, worships that same Lord. In other words, you have to turn back toward Krishna and start the process of bhakti, hearing and chanting and worshipping and everything. How? Bhakti aikayation, with one-pointed, serious devotion. You see? And Guru Deva Tattva, regarding one has to have a transparent medium, the spiritual master, who one regards in the same way you regard the Lord as his representative. We sing every morning, Sakshad Haritvena Samastashas. So that one verse is so rich, and Prabhupada would often quote it. So it all fits together. Daivi Prakriti is what we want to try to return to. And we do that by taking up the process of devotional service. When we're chanting Hare Krishna sincerely and hearing, we're in the spiritual energy. We're being affected by the spiritual energy, purified. And how do you feel the purification? Well, you become less interested in material energy. Just trying to meditate on the void, you still have all those unfulfilled material desires, that you're trying to suppress. But you can sublimate them by the process of bhakti. Very important, we sublimate them, Means that the desire for eating, okay, we'll cook some nice prasad, offer it to the Lord, and we'll relish it, Krishna tasted it, right? It's a spiritual experience. Which otherwise it could be a damning experience. You don't know, you go shopping in Ralph's or somewhere, it says, oh yeah, boy, the chopped liver looks really good. Let me buy it. Right? I didn't know. My mother taught me that. So you have to get away from those habits, and of course, if a few Sunday feasts is all it takes, really, if you have some good cooks. So that's what's being spoken of here. The Mahatmas, they've taken shelter, ashrita, of the divine nature, which means they're thinking of Krishna, listening to Krishna, associated with devotees, doing the things that we do. Bhajanti ananya manaso. And the proof is they worship me without deviation. This is pure devotee. This is Mahatmas. Ananya manaso, gyatva buddha. They understand I am the eternal source, right? Creation, the origin of creation, understanding that. If you keep that in mind, and you're worshiping Krishna. And the wonderful thing about Krishna consciousness is that we're dealing with the all-attractive personality of Godhead. It's not just that we're trying to meditate on the super soul or on the white light or anything like that. And the white light is not all attractive, The only thing attractive about it is that there's no birth, old age, disease, and death there. But that's negative. You can't be satisfied with that. Ye and ye arvindakshiva muktamaninas tvayasta bhava rabhishuddha buddhaya aruha kritrena padam padam tata patantyado anadvidayusmadangaya. Prabhupada quote this verse all the time. The demigods are praying to Krishna. He's about to take birth. They're hiding somewhere in the dungeon there of Kamsa, and they've come and they've offered these prayers. And I think the previous verses are glorifying the devotees, But here this verse said, yea and yea, but there are others besides the devotees, O lotus-eyed Lord. Yea and other than Daksha Vimukta Maninas who think that they're liberated. These are the impersonalists. Tvayastabhava avashuddha buddhiya, but they're averse to serving you because their intelligence has not been purified. Avishuddha buddhiya. And what's their fate? Aduha kritrena, a few of them, not all, through severe austerities, kritrena, can rise up to the Brahman stage, Brahmabhuta. Aduha kritrena param padan tatak patantyado. Anadrija yushmadangaya. But they fall down again because they're averse to serving your lotus feet. And because there's no bhakti there, there's no Krishna in the Brahma Jyoti. There's no you don't have a body either. You're just also a particle of consciousness. I am that I am. How long can you be satisfied with that? You know. And therefore, Prabodhananda Saraswati, he declares the famous verse, Kaivalyam Nadakayate. He has this list of things, you know, of describing the devotees who've been empowered by the sidelong merciful glance of Lord Chaitanya. In other words, who are advanced and empowered. Then here is their state of mind. They think that this Kaivalya merging in is just like going to hell, because there's no Krishna, no Bhakti, there's no nothing. Tridashapur, well, how about the heavenly planets? Indraloka, let's go enjoy, you know. So, Tridashapur Akasha Pushpa. There's not as interesting and as attracting as a sky flower, something that doesn't even exist. It's like, who cares, you know? And then what about the yogis? They're practicing their, you know, controlling the senses, you know. The difficult to control senses, which are like poisonous snakes, you know, that'll bite your consciousness. You know, Durdandan means hard to control. Or like Kala Sarpa, poisonous snakes that have had their fangs removed. In other words, you still have the senses, the same eyes, the same ears, same tongue, and everything, you know. But you're using them in Krishna's service, so they're your helpers. They're actually helping you serve Krishna. So where's the poison? It's all nectar. And then what about, so then there's this wonderful thing, Vishram Purna Sukhayate. Such a person, a pure devotee, you know, sees this world filled with Krishna's Leela pastimes, and so the whole world is full of happiness. Vishram Purna Sukhayate. And what about the demigods? Vidhi and Mahendra, you know, Indra and Brahma and so forth. Vidhi Mahendra, Adis, etc. Kitayate. You don't insult them, you know, but you don't think they're not objects of worship. And he says here, you know, they're as important to you as insects. So we don't insult the demigods, but anyway, that's in it. So, and then what brings this about? Yat karunya kataksha vaibhavatam. Those who have been empowered by the merciful sidelong glance of Lord Chaitanya, by being fully engaged in the Sankirtan movement. Yat karunya kataksha vaibhavatam tam goram evastabhak. It is that golden avatar whom I worship. A wonderful verse by Prabodhananda Saraswati. So, I'm not exactly sure how we got into that, but I think it's pertinent. The Mahatmas. We want to be on the Mahatma side. Now, then he describes more about the Mahatma. Go ahead, you have a question?
Yeah, so in the purport, maybe the fourth line, it says, one can become free from the control of material nature as soon as he surrenders his soul to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The question I have is, he surrenders his soul.
Well, here's how you can read it. He surrenders heart and soul. How's that? Does that work better for you?
Yeah,
We don't have, you know, it's not, we can't say my soul. We are the soul. We're a soul who, we can say my body, right? We're a soul with a body. We're not a body who has a soul. So it's a manner of speaking, but that kind of little thing, you know, we're not going to try to fix it. Okay? Just read it as heart and soul. Surrenders heart and soul. All right, moving on, another famous verse. Satatam kirtiyanto mam yatantascha dvadavataha namasyantascha mam bhaktya nityayukta upasate. So this is the qualities of the Mahatmas, you know, the great devotees, always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me. These great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. Purport: the Mahatma cannot be manufactured by rubber stamping an ordinary man. His symptoms are described here. A Mahatma is always engaged in chanting the glories of the Supreme Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead. He has no other business. He is always engaged in the glorification of the Lord. In other words, he's not an impersonalist. When the question of glorification is there, one has to glorify the Supreme Lord, praising his holy name, his eternal form, his transcendental qualities, and his uncommon pastimes. One has to glorify all these things. Therefore, a Mahatma is attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who is attached to the impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord, the Brahmajyoti, is not described as a Mahatma in the Bhagavad Gita. He is described in different ways in the next verse, in a different way. The Mahatma is always engaged in different activities of devotional service, as described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Hearing and chanting about Vishnu, not a demigod or human being. That is devotion. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, and Smaranam, remembering him. Such a Mahatma has firm determination to achieve at the ultimate end the association of the Supreme Lord in any one of the 5 transcendental rasas. To achieve that success, he engages all activities, mental, bodily, and vocal, everything, in the service of the Supreme Lord. That is called full Krishna consciousness. In devotional service, there are certain activities which are called determined, such as fasting on certain days, like the 11th day of the moon, Kadashi, and on the appearance day of the Lord. All these rules and regulations are offered by the great acharyas for those who are actually interested in getting admission into the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the transcendental world. The Mahatmas, or great souls, strictly observe all these rules and regulations, and therefore they are sure to achieve the desired result. As described in the 2nd verse of this chapter, not only is this devotional service easy, but it can be performed in a happy mood. One does not need to undergo any severe penance and austerity. He can live this life in devotional service, guided by an expert spiritual master, and in any position, either as a householder or a sannyasi or a brahmachari. In any position and anywhere in the world, he can perform this devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus become actually a Mahatma, a great soul. So I can't resist. But Prabhupada is talking about how the Mahatma is always chanting the glory. That's in the verse. Always chanting my glories. Now this verse has a special place in the pantheon of verses because Prabhupada, he was corresponding with this professor. He used to do that a lot. I think it may have been Stilson Judah. But anyway, and the professor was saying, well, what is all this? Because the devotees would go to the campuses sometimes and chant, you know. And he says, what is all this, you know, this chanting? And that's not in the Bhagavad Gita, that they're chanting all the time. It's quoted this verse. Satatam kirtayanto mam. Yatantascha dridhavata namasyandastamam. Now, the other thing that came to mind, some of you, a few of you must be familiar with this verse. It's ever fresh. This is from a book called the Padyavali. Now, the Padyavali is not by Rupa Goswami. It's Rupa Goswami's own nectar file. There's almost, I think there's 400 odd verses in there. It's a lot of verses. A few of them are written by him, but most of them are written by others. This one is not written by him, but it perfectly fits this purport. And it's describing the glories of someone who is always glorifying Krishna. So he says, aho bir, nakale, it's in my poetry file. Aho bir, nakale vaduyate, sudha sudhara, modalam pade pade, Dine dine chandana chandra shitalam yasho yashodatana yasagiyate. Now, those who aren't so familiar with the Vedic, culture and so forth, that of course a sandalwood pulp is cooling, and when the hot months and they'll smear the deity, it'll be chandan yatra or whatever. So, but it becomes even more cooling when you sprinkle some camphor in there. It's not the same camphor you use to get rid of moths, but it's very cooling. Powdered camphor. So that's in the verse. So what the English goes like this. Okay. Because at every step they drink a flood of wondrous nectar sweet, whose cooling power sandal paste enhanced with camphor can't defeat. They feel as if the raging blaze of Kali's days had ne'er begun. How blessed are they who fill their days with praise of Shri Yashoda's son. And when I counted that last line, I said, that is exactly how Prabhupada led his life. You study his activities, even when he had just a little crew, in 22nd Avenue, he was always giving classes and kirtans and, of course, writing his books, dictating, So he's filling his days with glorification. So you can see how blissful that is, So this is a verse describing it, because you're always drinking that nectar of Krishna consciousness, so you're able to tolerate so many things, and he had to, in New York and everything, and that horrific stroke that he had and everything. But he was always Satatam Kirti Yanto Mam. That's what he was doing. Okay, 8 o'clock. Any comments on that one? We can go on. Of course, we don't have any mic. Oh, we do have a mic, workable mic now? Yep. Oh, good. Okay. Text 15. Jnana yajnana chapyanye yajanto mam upasate ekatvena pratakvena Vahoda Vishvato Mukham. Okay, so this isn't exactly, these aren't those who are pure devotees always chanting his glories, but they're also devotees. Others who engage in sacrifice by the cultivation of knowledge worship the Supreme Lord as the one without a second, as diverse in many, and in the universal form. Purport. This verse is a summary of the previous verses. The Lord tells Arjuna that those who are purely in Krishna consciousness and do not know anything else, and anything other than Krishna, are called Mahatma. Yet there are other persons who are not exactly in the position of Mahatma, but who worship Krishna also in different ways. Some of them have already been described as the distressed, the financially destitute, the inquisitive, and those who are engaged in the cultivation of knowledge. But there are others who are still lower, and these are divided into three. 1, he who worships himself as one with the Supreme Lord. 2, he who concocts some form of the Supreme Lord and worships that. And 3, he who accepts the universal form, the Vishvarupa of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and worships that. Out of the above three, the lowest, those who worship themselves as the Supreme Lord, thinking themselves to be monists, are most predominant. Such people think themselves to be the Supreme Lord, and in this mentality they worship themselves. This is also a type of God worship, for they can understand that they are not the material body, but are actually spiritual soul. At least such a sense is prominent. Generally, the impersonalists worship the Supreme Lord in this way. The second class includes the worshippers of the demigods, those who by imagination consider any form to be the form of the Supreme Lord. And the third class includes those who cannot conceive of anything beyond the manifestation of this material universe. They consider the universe to be the supreme organism or entity and worship that. The universe is also a form of the Lord. So we find this a little more detail explained in the second canto. There's the first step in God realization. And it reminded me when I first read that of the 7th chapter, because the 7th chapter, remember how it begins? After a couple of verses of introduction, Krishna starts enumerating the material energies, right? Bhuma, Apa, Olano, Vayu. So that in itself is important, to understand, okay, this world is, my body is made of these energies, progressively more subtle. And then he gets to the whole point of it, and Rasoham Apsukontaya, Pabasmi Shashishurya. So this is how you can see me. This is also like seeing him in the universal form. When you see the sun, or you just see that the sunshine out, oh, now I remember Krishna, I am the sunshine, so I'm reminded of Krishna. And the fragrance of the earth, and of course the taste in water, the taste of anything, any liquid, So he's going through the different, the sound in ether, even if it's not directly about Krishna, it can remind you of Krishna just by being sound. So this is a first step to start to see Krishna in everything, in your surroundings, so that's, the universe is also a form of the Lord. It's more detailed, explained in the second canto, and of course we see the universal form in the 11th chapter. But we saw that, Arjuna, at one point didn't want to see it anymore. Please, can I please see your forearm form and finally your two-arm form, So that's the sentiment of a real devotee. Not so much interested in the universal form, but more interested in the beautiful threefold bending form of Krishna. Okay, one more. So now Krishna, after saying that, these others. Now he's going to say, "But I am all of these things." So coming back. Aham katoraham yagya, swadaham hamaushadam, mantoham hamevajam, aham agnir aham mutam. Wow, 8 ahams. But it is I who am the ritual, I the sacrifice, the offering to the ancestors, the healing herb, the transcendental chant. I am the butter and the fire and the offering. Purport. The Vedic sacrifice known as Jyotishtoma is also Krishna, and he is also the Mahayagya mentioned in the Smriti. The oblations offered to the Pitraloka, or the sacrifice performed to please the Pitraloka, I think this has been fixed. Offered to the Pitris, forefathers, or sacrifice performed to please the Pitris, considered as a kind of drug in the form of clarified butter, is also Krishna. The mantras chanted in this connection are also Krishna, and many other commodities made with milk products for offering in sacrifices are also Krishna. The fire is also Krishna because fire is one of the 5 material elements and is therefore claimed as the separated energy of Krishna. In other words, the Vedic sacrifices recommended in the Karma Kanda division of the Vedas are in total also Krishna. Or in other words, those who are engaged in rendering devotional service unto Krishna are to be understood to have performed all the sacrifices recommended in the Vedas. So, if you study the Gita, you see that Krishna mentions these other things, but he always brings it back to himself. And finally, what's the final verse in the chapter? We can all chant it together. Manmana bhava madbhakto manjaji mam namaskuru mamai vaishyasi yukvayavam atmanam matparayanaha. That's the essence of the whole thing. Just think of me, become devoted, worship me, bow down low. You'll come to me, O friend, I promise you this boon I shall bestow. That's the one in the 18th chapter. So we have a few minutes, and I'll just give you a little poem, one that maybe you haven't heard so often. Let's see. What was I thinking? Well, here's one for the newcomers, and you definitely haven't heard this before, and for the old comers, it's hopefully it's still enlivening. So this is called the Fall and Redemption of the Soul. Where Krishna lives, felicity abounds. With pure simplicity and loving sensibility, all serve him with humility. But when a living entity rejects his true identity and out of sheer stupidity surrenders to cupidity, he loses all sagacity and with all capacity to understand reality or curb his sensuality. Abandoning humility, he touts his own ability, forgetting his fragility and fortune's volatility. Immersed in asininity for what seems an infinity of lives devoid in piety, he suffers an anxiety till contact with God's devotee, perhaps of utmost brevity, awakens his affinity for words of the divinity. Perceiving the futility of all his imbecility, the soul regains his sanity and casts away his vanity. Endowed with new humility, he serves with all ability and growing spontaneity his guru and the deity. Regaining his identity, the wayward living entity returns to the fraternity of Krishna for eternity. So that's my little poem. Not bad. Never had any claps before. So we'll adjourn now and we'll gather for the kirtan. Thank you for your attention, and we'll